Hi, I'm Lou Jaffe, CEO, board member, award-winning professor, philanthropist, and actually all-around good guy. And I had the privilege of talking to Doug today, and we talked about 5 frogs sitting on a log. Why don't you come back, watch the show, and see when you get your frogs off that log.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, are you committed to up-leveling your leadership? Are all businesses the same, or are they all different? The answer might surprise you. Stay tuned. Remember, you can now chat about this episode or any past episodes on our Facebook and LinkedIn pages. Simply go looking for Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify, iHeart Radio, wherever you tune into radio podcasts. You can also help us stay relevant by going to those places, rate, review, subscribe, and share the show with everybody you know. You'll also find us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday. We are all the way from Las Vegas to Georgia and everywhere in between. You can also look for us on ROKU TV, where we have over 100,000 subscribers. Just look for Dov Baron on there. You'll find us. If you're a regular listener, regular viewer, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. And you can also catch us on Spotify or Google Home or Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron Podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, an entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, you know that the diversification of business has created industries that didn't even exist as little as 20 years ago. But when you boil it down, what is it that all businesses have in common? And if you knew what those key elements were, could you transform your business and your business success? Well, let's find out together. My guest on this episode is Lou Jaffe. Lou Jaffe is an author. He's a CEO, a board member, an award-winning college professor who won Professor of the Year in his second year of teaching. He's a philanthropist. He has built a billion-dollar tech company. He is a futurist for Amazon and AWS. He sits on the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ boards, and advising and directing on keys to his success in scaling and growing companies. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me to welcome the man known as the godfather of video conferencing, Lou Jaffe!
Yay! I've got to tell you.
The crowd goes Meshuggah.
I listened to what you just said, and I said, oh my God, who is that guy? He sounds so cool. And then I realized it was me. But I want your listeners to know I am a big fan of yours. As a matter of fact, this morning, as I'm scrolling through social media, I saw your little post about truth or comfort, and I actually commented on it. So it's the old, as a New England Patriots fan, go Pats. Victor Kiam owned the team for a while, and thank God he did, because he sold it to Kraft and they became great. He used to say, not only when he bought Remington Razor, not only did I like the company so much, but I bought the company. I love your stuff, and it is such an honor to be here with you. So thank you for inviting me.
That is quite the honor coming from you, Lou. Thank you so much. I am genuinely touched. Thank you, sir. So let's jump in with my favorite beginning question, which is, in a world of influence where we're all influenced by everybody, and particularly those of us who are a little bit older, there's people who are influential from history. But what I find is that with most leaders, there is somebody who impacted us, somebody who had an impact on our lives that the other people may not suspect. People may not even know, a name they may not even know. Who's somebody who's had a massive impact on your life, who's been a major influence in your life that we might not suspect or know?
Gosh, I'm going to go with one of my first bosses. His name was Sam. And Sam was a fascinating guy, incredibly brilliant, gutsy, a true entrepreneur, world traveler. He was by far the best problem spotter that I have ever met. If he said, there's an issue, there's an issue. Now, he had two little flaws. He was a horrendous problem solver, and he didn't have a really good volume. So a problem, he could not scale it. So he would not have been a great ER surgeon, because if you went into the hospital with a heart attack and a cut thumb, they were both an equal problem. But he was a really cool cat and so smart. And one of the first lessons I learned was, number one, be aware, because he was always scanning the room. Always, his awareness was amazing. But also, he was all bark and no bite, which actually, as soon as I understood that, it made it so much easier to listen to him. Because I wasn't listening to the bark, I was listening to what motivated the bark.
Right.
And under the concept of where there's smoke, there's fire, being really well aware of that. And then I incorporated that into my own leadership style and became really careful of not barking. And really trying to communicate and also attenuate. So I knew the difference between the heart attack and the cut thumb. And I use that today when I'm doing executive coaching or when I'm teaching at the university. And I share all the time, learning the difference between interesting and important is such a key element. And I really think that goes way back to Sam. Because I will tell you, it's all too often people confuse the two, because interesting is way more fun.
Well, as that video you just talked about, which is, the desire for comfort versus truth. And comfort means you go to the easy thing, but truth means you go to the hard thing. And most of us don't want to do that. Most of us want to go, well, it's not really a problem yet. Yet is the underline.
But, it's like milk. It really, problems never get better over time. It's not wine.
Yeah, it's not wine. It's definitely not wine. So before we jump into anything else, you have a book which has a very unusual title because you're, particularly for you as a college professor, right? So you're a college professor, you're an award-winning college professor, and your book is called One Day MBA. Right. So help us reconcile this craziness.
Well, it's actually, and thanks for bringing that up, because I get asked that question actually. People look at me and they say, well, how can you be a college professor and teach MBAs and then you tell the world there's a one-day MBA? First off, it's kind of interesting. So I am a clinical professor. I don't do research per se. I mean, I'm constantly reading, but I'm not publishing. I'm not trying to advance the body of science. My responsibility is to take practical experience into the classroom.
Yeah.
So, for example, I don't use books in my classroom for the most part. I'm all about having people read newspaper articles, and I realize that's a dead word, newspaper, but we can circle back to that later. But I like articles, I like case studies, because it creates a dialogue and it creates a conversation. But One Day MBA is actually a play on words, because there are so many people today, they say, I'm going to get my MBA, and we can have the whole conversation of, is there value in that? Because they're so expensive. And it's interesting with millennials and generations after that, they're such an on-demand generation. They don't need to own a car. They'll get a car when they need it. They order their food online. They don't watch the 9 o'clock news at 9 o'clock. They get it when they want. Everything is on demand. And thanks to, and it's interesting, you talked about podcasts. One of the things, the greatest thing that Apple did under Jobs, one could argue, was iTunes.
Mm-hmm.
One could argue if you were an artist, it was the worst thing ever.
Absolutely.
Because when we were young and we would buy a record, another dead word, we would get 12 tracks to get the 2 that we really wanted.
Yes.
And iTunes disaggregated that. Now,
Yep.
the good news is you get the songs you really want. The bad news is you miss all this amazing stuff that surrounds it.
Yeah.
And that's
even think of Fleetwood Mac's Rumors album.
Yeah.
Right? You know, that was an album of greatest hits, just as an example
Yes.
from the 80s. But if you'd have bought it for a track you liked, you'd have never heard every other track, which was superb. And the Eagles, Hotel California, I mean, there was so many of those albums that were like greatest hits albums. U2, Joshua Tree, I'm a music freak. But all those albums,
I'm all in.
right? But all those albums were like greatest hits albums later.
Absolutely. And that gets back. So the One Day MBA is, one day you may want an MBA, but if you read this, you're going to get elements. And again, it's not about, and I still cannot do an IRR without a calculator. So there's some things, but the practical lessons,
Yes.
and, you know, so interesting versus important. I talk a lot about the ecosystem. It's not just about, people get so inwardly focused on their business without looking at the ecosystem. In an MBA programs, we really compare, look at your business as, you know, since imitations is the sincerest form of flattery. So that is somewhat true, but also imitation can be problematic because then you're not necessarily advancing the ball.
Right.
And, you know, there was a great Woody Allen movie years and years ago, so I'm going to date myself, you know, Annie Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about the relationship, and he said, our relationship is like a shark because the shark always needs to move forward to breathe.
Yep.
And our relationship's not moving forward, so what we have on our hands is a dead shark. And I think if you're focusing just on imitation, you're not moving forward. If you've ever been on a subway or a train, when you're on the train and there's a train on the other track that's passing you, you get this apparent motion thing. It actually looks like you're going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens in business because you're opening, you know, all business is the same. And I'm sure we'll get into that conversation. But one of the things that's true in all businesses, your competitor's job is to eat your lunch.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you're not innovating around your customer, you never underestimate that your competitor's doing that and focus on that innovation around your customer because that's who they want.
Well, that's interesting because not that video you just talked about, but I want the one I released before that, where I talked about, I asked a question, and the question was, I said, who was the disruptor of blockbusters? And everybody knows the answer. It's Netflix. Okay, cool. And so, but what everybody forgets is this. And I said, the question when I asked you then, who did Blockbuster disrupt? And people went, no one. Yeah, they did. My mate had a video store in Australia and Blockbuster killed him. And the lesson in life is that we have got to disrupt the disruptors. And I love what Bezos said. Bezos said about a month ago in an interview, he said, Amazon is going bankrupt. And people like stalled and went, what? And he went, not now, but eventually. Our job is to stay ahead of that. Right. And he understands that the disruptor will be disrupted. And it's not good enough to just imitate, that you actually have to really advance it. So we're talking about, you know, I opened up, you said I opened up with this, businesses, are they the same or are they different? And then we've gone on to this, you know, the dead shark syndrome. So now let's talk about, well, where are they different and where are they the same? And how do we move forward in what is a democratized and in many ways a commoditized world of business?
So we'll start off with the quote that you were referring to out of my book is actually, all businesses are the same. They exist to gain and retain customers profitably in order to create value.
Yes.
That's true about any business, period, end of story. Now, it's interesting. Let's deconstruct the story that you just brought up. Who did Blockbuster, you know, and Netflix, where's the disruption? So I would make the argument, Netflix did not disrupt Blockbuster. Blockbuster's late fees disrupted Blockbuster, and Netflix saw the opening to change the rules of the game.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Because one could argue Netflix disrupted Netflix because
That's true.
video recorder, having the DVR changed things a little bit. So now you had everything on demand. But why get in your car and drive to the video store and wonder if they only have 4 copies of the video and you're number 5, you may as well be number 82. It's like when you're number 1 on the upgrade list and there's no seats, is that really number 1? You're last.
Right.
There's no difference between 1 and 97 when there's 0.
That's very good. Yes, it's true.
Yeah, so with Netflix realized people didn't want, well, they made it easy because they mailed you the DVD, but sometimes you didn't get it the exact day you wanted because they only had X number of copies. But with streaming coming on board, you could get what you want when you wanted, and you didn't have to wait for the mailman.
Right.
So they actually disrupted themselves. So one of the conversations I love having about disruption is every business should be thinking about how to disrupt itself.
I agree.
Focus on that one thing that it's not doing for its customers. So let's deconstruct my opening sentence. All businesses are the same. Gain and retain customers profitably. So
Yes.
So many people are embarrassed about the P word. Well, if you don't have the P word, you don't have a business.
Right.
But gain and retain. I cannot tell you how many times I've been at a pitch contest or somebody's looking for investments, or I go to a public company investor seminar, and they always bring up the cost of customer acquisition, and everybody wants to understand that. And that's a really important. Gaining customers is important.
Of course.
Retaining customers almost takes a back seat, and it should not, because you've already invested in getting them. So what is it to retain them? And that disruption that we just talked about is really what is all about the retention, because somebody else is trying to get them. And the truth is, a happy customer tells 1 or 2 people. You know what an unhappy customer tells? Everybody.
Yeah.
And now, because between Twitter and Yelp, nobody posts the good stuff. But if somebody's angry, and if you take a look, if you follow Twitter, the retweets, rarely is a positive one retweeted when you look at the percentages. So it's that retention. And what do you do? How do you get tomorrow to be a little better? So I ran a company that did movies in hotel rooms. Mm-hmm. We were the 2nd largest. And it was interesting every morning because it was at the worst time, because Netflix was just transitioning to streaming, and you had iTunes, and you were competing in the room. We actually got into the Wi-Fi business because in the room itself, you're thinking you control that television, because that's really what the video on demand in hotel does. Right. Think about this disruption. Number one, and you travel. I travel. When I go to the East Coast, if I take a red eye, I'm exhausted, so I end up going to bed early the next night after working all day. Or when I get back to the hotel, I have an hour or two's worth of emails because I've been busy doing my job. So then I have to do my other job of returning emails. And so then, do I really have 2 hours left to watch a movie? Now, back in the day when the video on demand in hotel rooms really got busy and really grew, the hotels gave you 7 to 10 TV channels. Now they give you every channel. So if we were trying to think about competition, number one, it's the TV itself, all the free channels. Number 2, it's the internet, because people now can log on to Netflix and watch a movie, or they downloaded a movie on their mobile device. They don't even need to watch it on the TV. So the world had changed. So we actually, to disrupt ourselves, we started providing Wi-Fi, this is in the earlier days of Wi-Fi, into the room in order to survive. So that disruption is not just the disruption of somebody doing something better. It's you have to look at the ecosystem. What else is available? Your competitor is not necessarily just that guy that when somebody says, who do you compete with? Ford, will I compete with GM? Well, now Ford is competing with Bird. Some people don't need a car. They're just going to rent a scooter downtown.
Yes.
They're competing with Uber. Somebody doesn't want a car, they want a car on demand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in New York City, they're coming up with a congestion. They already have it in London. So it's going to cost you another $12 a day for the privilege of driving in Midtown. So now you're competing, Ford, you're competing with the bus.
Yes.
Because the people, not just, you know, it's total cost of ownership. It's not just the $50,000 you pay for the car. It's not just the insurance. It's now the tax to drive it where you want to drive it. So really looking to grow your business at all the disruptors, not just if you're Ford looking at GM.
Yeah, I mean,
pulling those visors back.
I think that's a really important point. Is I'm trying to remember, one of our guests on the show talked about the. I'll remember who it was in a minute because I can see him in my head. But one of the things he talked about was the great disruptors are the people who understand the cost of doing business. And he goes, all those things you say are the cost of doing business are all the ways to disrupt the business. And he talked about how we say, well, you know, this is what we do, but this is the cost of doing business. And it's not money. It's that we have to deal with this department, or we have to go through these 3 hoops, because that's the cost of doing business in this industry. And so in the context of what you're talking about, which is movies on demand in a room, the cost of doing business was, oh, okay, well, Wi-Fi. We never thought about Wi-Fi. Now we got to think about Wi-Fi. And you have to get into a different disruption. And I think it's really good, because what you're actually asking us to do, as you said, is to pull off the blinders and look at things in a much bigger way than we've ever done. And I think that that's one of the great, this is why the internet is the great disruptor, because it allows us to see that everything is open now and everybody is potentially your competitor. And there are people, you know, there are 14-year-old girls making $10 million a year with an industry they built, a cottage industry they built out of YouTube. And you're like, that's my competition? Yeah. But we're a 20-year company with all kinds of investments and all of it. That's your new competition. And so I love that you're asking us to just open it up a little bit and see things in a much wider view.
So, time and convenience. People forget time. You're talking about cost. It's time and convenience. Once again, did Amazon disrupt retail? Or it was really cool. Malls got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So there was so much selection at the mall. That's really nice. You have unlimited selection. But now parking got harder. Getting lost in the mall got harder. And Amazon it's convenient.
Mm-hmm.
And as our minds changed, the whole thing of internet surfing, well, if you think about it, Amazon is not just a shopping place. It is the largest search engine for product. People search product on Amazon. They don't go to Google. They go to Amazon.
And
it's convenience and time.
You've kind of launched us into another subject here, which I find very interesting. I've been speaking a lot about AI lately. I'm doing a big presentation on AI. You know, and there's a lot of fear around AI for a lot of people in the workforce, and I understand that, because there's no doubt that AI and robot machines and robot learning will take over a lot of quote unquote low-level jobs. But one of the things that we all forget is that there are new industries created out of something new. Something old has to go away, and yes, there's a loss. And again, that's the comfort over the truth. And the truth is that there'll be new stuff that'll come out of that. And so as an example is what we were just talking about, Amazon. Amazon created, you know, it's killed so much retail. But at the same time, how much cottage industry has been built out of Amazon? How many people are now selling stuff on Amazon that they make in their kitchen? Or or Etsy have come out of it, or whatever it is. Massive, massive cottage industries. Here's one, just so people don't realize this. Here's one, because I mentioned it a few minutes ago. My wife loves to watch videos on YouTube of favorite buys from Amazon. These are people who make videos. These are my top 10 buys from Amazon that I love. And these people are getting massive, massive revenue from advertising. They're getting affiliate fees from Amazon. There's an entire cottage industry been built out of people who may have had another job and gotten unemployed. But somebody went, oh, there's an opportunity here, as opposed to, oh, there's a disadvantage here. And that's a shift, right?
Beyond that, take a look at retail today. I live in Los Angeles, and there's in Century City, there's this really beautiful mall that started to die. And now half the stores are experiential. They have this one store there, you go in and it's a virtual reality aquarium, and you just have this amazing experience. And then when you're there, you shop. So even the people that have been disrupted are now creating a disruptor of their own industry, because we adapt, right? I don't want to get into the religious conversation, but evolution is real. And I'm not just talking about, did we start out in the water and then we came onto the land and now we stand upright? But everything evolves. We move forward, back to Dead Shark, we move forward or we die. So Amazon did disrupt retail, but now retail is coming back in a slightly different, evolved, more fun form.
Yeah, I agree. Now, let's sort of move on to you a little bit, because there's an apparent, I say apparent, that's all it is. There's an apparent dichotomy. Philosophically, you are a philanthropist. You've done a lot of philanthropic work. And there's also a connection to a big pharmaceutical company, which seems like might be a little.
I get it.
So talk us through that, if you don't mind.
With Novartis, so I'll say the name because I'm very proud of them and the amazing things they do. And I just want to put Novartis in perspective for you. There's 1 billion people on the planet taking a Novartis drug, which means 1 in 7 to 8 people, they're helping them have a better quality of life. Now, I understand it's not philanthropic because they're charging them an arm and a leg some of the time. But I am on the digital innovation side. So we have something called the biome. And the biome is small companies we're incubating, helping them improve life. So one of the companies that we're doing, it's Humanetics, and it's amazing. And you want to talk about philanthropy or not? So in Africa, the amount of babies that die because of sickle cell is mind-boggling. And so many people in sub-Saharan Africa, if they can get to a clinic, it's a 2-day walk. Yes. It's not easy at all. And current technologies are very expensive and take 24 to 48 hours to diagnose, because there's multiple forms of sickle cell. Not just that you have it, but what's the form, therefore what's the treatment.
Right.
And one of our companies actually has developed a test, and I'm not trying to compare them to Theranos because that was just a bad situation, but actually a blood test for sickle cell that takes less than 30 minutes to diagnose and type.
Wow.
Imagine how that can change the lives of 30 million people.
Wow. Because
they can get treated, they can get medicine then and there. Another one of our companies called Conversational Health, because you brought up AI. Conversational Health is pretty amazing. They've created a bot where you have a real-type conversation around content. So let's say, God forbid, you get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And your doctor mentions the drug that you're thinking about, or even type 2. The drug company, you're now going to, if you go onto the internet, you have a real problem, because the internet never shows the good pictures. It is just a horrible experience and a rat hole. But imagine going into a conversation bot, and they have in the background all of these different contextual answers. So they understand how to ask your question. And I'm not saying all physicians don't have bedside manners, but some don't. So we actually use script writers that know how to have a safe dialogue. And so somebody can ask a question about the drug, and there are answers, and based on the context of the way you ask the question, we can give you answers in a way you could never get before. And as healthcare costs go up, doctors have to take care of more and more patients. They get quicker and quicker. They don't have the time. So we've developed this technology at Conversational Health to actually help people better understand their disease and better understand the treatment. So a lot of what we do is to help mankind. So I have no issue with it at all, because I know we're making people's lives better, whether it be in developing countries and bringing medicine that they could never have or never afford, or even in, very developed countries where we can give greater comfort to sick people.
Yeah.
So that's where I come out on all of that.
Thank you for clearing that up. That's an important piece. Let's go back in time a bit, Lou. So tell us, how did you? I mean, you built billion-dollar companies. You're on these crazy boards. You're a professor.
I think companies would not like we called them crazy, but they are incredibly diverse and unique from my background.
Crazy boards, I said. Crazy boards, right? Crazy big. I mean, the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, etc. So tell us how you got started. Like, what's the story of Lou?
So, story of Lou. I think there's two types of people. There are, oh my God, that could be a horrible movie.
Yeah, there's a couple of
or a fetish film, depending on where you're coming from. But no, all kidding aside, I think that, and again, it goes back to my early career and just understanding the focus of problems and solving problems. In an engineering background, that's what engineers do, solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
And taking a unique and creative perspective and understanding it's always about the person on the other side of the table. So when you put all that stuff together,
yes,
that really is where I come from. I was a basketball player, so I understood the importance of a team and getting the most out of the team and getting everybody working together. So we're all a sum total of all of our experiences.
Of course.
And so building a company was all about focusing on the customer. And that was always very clear to me. And how do you satisfy a customer but still make a profit at it and not being embarrassed about profit? But if you're creating an exchange of value, and so funny aside, so I have an Audi. Here's a perfect example.
Right.
And it's really interesting. When I open my door, it projects the little Audi circles onto the ground. Beautiful little. And when I was looking to buy the car, this guy looks at me and goes, "That's $800." And I said, "That's really cool." And he goes, "That's the coolest $800 option we have." And I said, "For $800, I'm good with dark ground." But if you get the Blaupunkt radio, it's free. And I love it, to your point, great music. In Hotel California, if you don't have the subwoofer, you're missing a big chunk of the music. By the way, one of the greatest songs ever written. But anyway, so they understand that, they develop this stuff, and what's the difference between what people will pay for versus what people want. But the exchange of value, I didn't mind spending. I know I overspent for the radio, but I got the lights. But I would have never just bought the lights. But that's how I think. I understood that guy, that marketing guy that put all that stuff together. And so in my career, that's what I've done. And it was really interesting. So I am a video compression guy, the godfather of video conferencing, because when that came up, the person they were comparing me to, who was called, usually was the father. And then because the next generation took over, the grandfather. And I looked at him and said, "You're older than me. You could be the grandfather. I'll be the godfather." And it kind of stuck. But nothing says tossing shrimp into your hat. And, I was the lead independent director at Benihana. Video compression algorithms and tossing shrimp into your hat are identical in some sphere. But I met Rocky Aoki along the way, and he was looking for someone that brought a different perspective to the business.
Mm-hmm.
And so he put me on the board, and at the halfway through my board career, we were at the worst time. Being a profitable restaurant, it was really interesting. We were profitable, and our bank, Wachovia, went bankrupt.
Oh.
And now when banks get in trouble, what loans do they call? Do they call the non-performing loans who can't pay? No, they call the performing loans. And we had to go through all of those iterations. But instead of panicking, it's always about work at the problem. And we got through 2008, and less people were going out to have dinner.
Right.
But we worked the problem, and we weathered the storm really well. So I got the reputation amongst investors and stuff that this is a guy that keeps his cool, works the problem. And again, all businesses are the same. So yes, video compression algorithms has nothing to do with the restaurant business, but it does have a lot to do with how do you create a message to get people to come through your door and buy your product. And so I sort of got a reputation about making good decisions. And my network became more and more hedge funds and more Wall Street people. So I would get phone calls. Listen, we have this company. It's kind of in trouble. And they just need somebody that's going to take a step back and bring a new perspective. Go in and help it. And so that's been a lot of fun. And it's interesting, often boards of directors get a negative connotation because, people think about the smoke-filled back rooms, and that's so not true. But the people that I've experienced have all been so smart, and they really do want to help the shareholders. And the only way you help the shareholders is by building a business. So again, the restaurant business, I never realized the importance of the real estate portfolio, but now I have that in my, another arrow in my quiver. So you learn. And I think that goes back to one of the reasons that I love watching your stuff and listening to your podcast. Listen, I'm old. I don't deny that I'm old, but I learn something new every day. And even though, again, going to this morning's video, truth or comfort, and I've had that conversation with people before.
Yep.
But just the way you worded it got me to back in the foreground as opposed to the background of my head. And it re-energizes. And I think that's what happens on boards. You have these amazing conversations, and then you implement because, I'm going to tell you, I close often. I do a lot of public speaking, and I close with something called 5 frogs.
5 wrongs?
5 frogs. 5 frogs sat on a log. 4 decide to jump off. How many frogs remain on the log?
5 frogs.
5 frogs sat on a log.
Sat on a log.
4 decide to jump off. How many frogs remain on the log?
That would seem to be 1.
But it's
I feel like I've missed something.
Absolutely, because it's 5. Because deciding to jump and jumping are rarely related.
Aha, very good.
Okay, and that's
they think do gap.
Boards and Lou and career. What's 5 frogs got to do with it? I think the fact I can fix 100 bad decisions and bad actions. I can't fix 1 indecision or no action.
That's very true.
So getting back to me, I'm a take action guy. And because I'm a guy that works the problem, whatever problem we solve, and it gets back, I like to sail. And sailing is interesting. Motorboaters, they get in the boat, they turn on the key, they go to their destination. Sailors, we know that's where we're going, but the winds change, the waves change, everything changes. So you're constantly interacting and you're about the journey.
Right.
Business is as much about the journey as it is the destination. Because so many things change.
But people want business to be about a speedboat, and it's not. It's a sailboat. And I think that's a great message for people. You want it to be a speedboat. I get that. That's the comfort choice. That's the luxury choice. But the truth choice is it's a sailing trip, and the waves are going to come, and the tide is going to turn, and the wind is going to change, and all those things. And if you're not equipped, you are going to sink.
And I'm going to add one more thing to that, which people don't really think about, and it's so incredibly true, which is when you're sailing, if some guy passes you on the wrong side, they steal your wind. How is that not like your competitor? And you have to manage them stealing your wind without losing your momentum.
And
so we can just take these sailing
so we can play with this analogy forever, because you also got to have a bloody good crew who know what the hell they're doing. And you cannot do it on your own. You can sail around the world on your own. People have done it. It is not easy. It is far more difficult than having a team.
And let's talk about not easy for a second. How many people look at you or look at me and say, oh my God, they have it so easy. They've got this money and they can have this kind of great conversation. No successful person that I know has ever had it. There are easy days. They worked for it. And it's nobody really likes to talk about the hard work, but there is a lot of hard work. I had an interesting conversation with a PhD with the university who's getting reaccredited. And this PhD had a conversation with me and was questioning, because I was not a teacher, right? I came in as a clinical. And he says, what makes you think that you can really teach these students? And I said, have you ever stayed up late on a Thursday night wondering if you're going to make payroll? Because until you've done that, you have no idea what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Yeah. You can read about it. You can see how somebody else dealt with it. Until you've had that experience and you can share that experience with somebody else in the first person.
Vastly different.
And we have first person stuff. And that's what I love about listening to your interviews. People talk about their experiences, which is the best way to learn. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And Bezos, you talk about Bezos, right? Bezos he hates PowerPoint. He's death by PowerPoint. Before a meeting, you send out a couple of paragraphs. You tell a story, because the human mind thinks in
remember stories. Yeah.
Even how often have you been driving down the road and you see something way ahead and you create a story in your mind what it is, and then when you get closer, it's not even the story that you
exactly.
saw.
Yeah.
I just watched a Netflix special with Whitney Cummings, who was talking about she saw a puppy on the side of the road. I mean, in the middle of the road, and she pulls over and she stops traffic. She gets out to save that puppy, and it turned out it was an empty paper bag. But she said that she picked it up and she held it like it was a puppy because she didn't want anybody else to know that it was an empty paper bag.
Brilliant.
But she saw what she saw, and we
exactly, and that's what we all do.
Stories.
So let's go back a bit, because, you know, as I said, you've been extraordinarily successful, and you now your book, the One Day MBA, you have courses, and I want to get into that before we finish. But at this point, I want to go back further, because I believe with every fiber of my being that we're all impacted by our childhoods, and you have had some experiences in your childhood. Tell us a little bit about you know, the seeds of this, Lou, because they were planted in childhood. You have a sibling who's a little different. You know, you got some things going on. Tell us about where it all began.
So I was an only child for 4 minutes. It was a peaceful time.
4 whole minutes.
Yeah, 4 whole minutes. And then my brother showed up, and he was absolutely brilliant. So I had to find air my entire life and find a way to be importantly different. Mm-hmm. My brother was, and sadly he passed a few years back. You know, I shared a womb, a room, and a life. Mm-hmm. And so I had a mentor and a peer living with me. And so there was a benefit of that. I also, I had 2 amazing parents, and my father used to say to my brother and I all the time, take everything away from you but your honor, that's yours to give. And that was from being little. Integrity was such an important part of my life. And I think that helps, because people do business with us because they know us, they like us, and they trust us. And who can trust us if we have no integrity?
Absolutely.
And my mother was just very powerful. And sadly, Dad died when my brother and I were young. And Mom just never wanted us to feel different. And she had a work ethic second to none. And we used to do homework in the kitchen table, my brother and I, while Mom was doing books. She had a day job, and then she was a bookkeeper. She was doing books for various physicians at night. She had this amazing work ethic to make sure we were taken care of. And it's interesting, millennials now get a bad rap for not having a work ethic. And I argue that, no, they just have a different work ethic. They're project-based. If you tell them this is what you need to get done, here's the goal, you have to accept that they may choose to work at 2 o'clock in the morning because they're in the on-demand generation, which really doesn't help if you have a store that opens at 9 and you want them there when the customers are there. But for the most part, it's about their work ethic of getting things mission-oriented and getting things accomplished. And Mom was all about that. So I had this integrity and work hard and do the right thing and make sure your customers are happy. And I had a brother who was really smart and challenged me every day. And then I had this amazing basketball coach in the 8th grade, Philip Finkelday. I'll never forget another person that, impressed or left an imprint on my life. And he used to yell at you all the time. Always do your best and never, ever give up. That's what he would yell in practice, because he hated that you didn't want to play defense, and he was yelling at you to run back, because everybody likes playing with the ball.
Right.
It's interesting, but what's important is not letting the other team score. So defense was important.
Right.
Offense was interesting. And he used to yell that. And then if you were in a game and you heard him, Lou, 9 words, you knew if you didn't hustle, you were going to be riding the pine 1 second later. And so when you put those lessons together, I think, and we're all the sum total of our experiences, but it was interesting when computers first came out and screens had a problem of burning in. You used to have screensavers. Now you don't have to worry about that. But I used to have a little airplane flying was my screensaver with a banner behind, like what you see at the beach.
Oh, yeah.
On the banner, it said 9 words. It's always do your best and never, ever give up. But that also brings an interesting, to finish that off, often I have told people it's time to pivot. And pivoting is not giving up.
No.
Pivoting is realizing you're on a bad path. So it's not quitting. It's making a change, and not giving up means make a change. So you're still in the fight. You're just fighting differently.
Yeah, and I think that in business, I know from the work that we do, in business, oftentimes we equate the two things as the same, and it's ego. The ego says, oh, you're being a quitter if you, no, you're being smart if you walk away from something that isn't working. You're being smart if you pivot in a new direction with it. But, as you've talked about it here, we talked about evolution and the business's evolution, and I truly believe that. There's great conversation about it this week. Business's evolution. I talked about in that video you mentioned that we are part of an adaptive system, that we only thrive when we adapt, and we only adapt when there's a problem that we realize. So that adaptation is most often is forced upon us. And what I mean by that is that there's usually something that happens. For me, I literally fell off a mountain and got smashed to pieces. Some people, it's something else. What was the turning point in your life, in your career, in your leadership philosophy? What was it? There's something, I know that there was a common experience that you and I had. Tell us about what changed you.
Oh my God. That's an infinite list. I would like to believe I'm a lifelong learner. I think it's, I'll tell you one that was really impactful. So I do a fair amount of public speaking. When you're a CEO, you're speaking all the time at investors conferences, or in my case, tech conferences. And one that's really pivotal that I want to share was very interesting. One of the things that's really fun when you speak at a conference is afterwards you get the line and people want to ask you a question. And we talk about ego, and I try to check my ego at the door, but anybody that tells you doesn't have an ego lies.
Of course.
So yes, of course I have an ego. And there's nothing greater than when somebody comes up and says, I really enjoyed what you said. Can you tell me a little more? I love that question. Tell me more. And I love sharing, but I also love listening. Just as a quick aside, I don't learn anything when I talk. I learn when you talk, and it makes me think of more stuff. So I want to listen. But this one guy sort of cuts the line, and he says to me, I got a really quick question. And I look at him and I said, give me a minute. Let me finish with this lady that I'm talking with. Just give me a minute. And he storms off. And I finished the line, and it was at a trade show. And so I'm walking the floor, and I'm looking at the booths, and I'm learning, and I see this guy. And I walk up to him, and I said, I'm so sorry we didn't get a chance to chat. What can I do for you? And he goes, you're an asshole. And I'm thinking, he didn't know me long enough to really know that that's true. But
it's a large assumption.
Yeah, I said, excuse me, but why do you say that? He said, you stuck your finger in my face. And in my mind, I said, give me a second. But what he perceived was, give me a second. And it was a real turning point for me, because it was how you're perceived is more important. And it shouldn't be, because if you have honor and integrity and doing the right thing, but it doesn't matter. It's what that person heard. And, there's an interesting book. I've been divorced for 12 years and, I was married for 27. So I know everything was my fault or really my fault. But being divorced, I read this book, as this young lady told me once to read it, The Love Languages. And it's so true.
Of course it is.
And I actually have my MBAs read it, not because, and especially post Me Too, and we don't want to have any of that sort of thing, but I think it's really important that people understand, in the love languages, it talks about if you're a person that needs to be touched, but your significant other is giving you praise, you don't hear the praise because you need to be touched.
Of course.
The praise is almost irrelevant. So understanding that person's language. I teach Myers-Briggs in one of my classes because I think Myers-Briggs is really interesting. And it's important to know who you are and I suggest to all of your listeners, do a Myers-Briggs and understand who you are, but then spend time learning about the 15 other combinations. There's a 16 total.
Yes.
So if I am someone so the first letter of Myers-Briggs is, do you get your energy from inside or outside? Are you an introvert or an extrovert? And that's not about, are you the life of the party? It's, I travel to the beat of my own drummer. I am an introvert. I love when people come to the party with me, but I don't really yield that much to peer pressure because I'm getting the energy from inside. But if I'm talking with somebody and I know that they're an extrovert, I try to paint the picture on how they're part of something bigger because that's so critical to them.
Absolutely.
So I'm building that relationship because I'm understanding them. And that goes way back, Phil Finkel Day, or as we called him, Coach Fink, or at least behind his back. But we, always do your best and never give up. He understood the nature of most competitive athletes. You got to compete. Always do your best. It resonates.
Of course.
So when you understand what resonates with somebody else, it makes a total difference. And that lesson from that one guy in the moment that, and I get a kick out of it. Everybody says, Rodney Dangerfield was a big one, showing my age again. I'm so misunderstood. You know what?
Get no respect.
Yeah. We're simply misunderstood because we don't understand the baggage and the experience, the life experience somebody else has. And it's horrible. In today's society, we become so divisive. You're not a member of my clan, you're a member of that clan. We're 99% the same. Yeah. We need to respect that 1% difference, but not just focus on it, but have conversations that allow that 1% difference to fade into the background.
Yeah, I am a big proponent of that. What you say and what is heard are often vastly different, and that's why you have to check what was heard. Because I came in yesterday as an example, and I said to my wife, "Oh, you're up here, babe," and she said, "Yeah," and I said, "My wife gives me crap all the time because I leave the lights on. I don't, I forget to turn lights off, and I go,
I'd be a horrible roommate for you too."
Yeah, so because I forget to turn lights off. And I came upstairs and I said, you're up here? And she goes, "Yeah." And I'm joking around. And I go, the lights are on downstairs. Well, I'm playing, but that was an attack.
Yeah.
Right? And now, of course, it wasn't an attack from my point of view, but I totally get that it was an attack from hers. And I need to apologize for, and this is one of the things that people don't get, that your humility and your compassion are part of your rapport. Rapport is not just about connecting with somebody, but having humility and compassion. And the best way I can say this to people is their reality is still a reality. You may disagree with it, but it's still a reality. And not everybody needs to be believed, because I think that's a very dangerous, slippery slope. But everybody needs to be heard and be willing to be believed. That's different. So I'm willing to believe you. I'm certainly willing to hear you. And I need to pay attention to make sure there's no malice in what's being said, because otherwise I cancel the discernment of listening.
Right.
Good points. Lots to go on there.
I love that. And if I can add one thing, and to really touch so back into business, it's so spot on. We all were taught at an early age, the customer's always right.
Yes.
And that actually creates angst inside organizations, because organizations know that people inside the organization know the customer's not right. If you put a little spin, a little nuance on it, the customer needs to be treated as if they're right. It allows the person inside the company to feel, you know what, I know they're not right. So I'm validating. When I tell that to my teams, I let the employees and the team members validate their own feelings of that customer's just awful. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they need to validate the customer's experience.
That's it. Brilliantly said.
And so that just tied in nicely to what you were saying. So I thought I'd give you that.
Yeah, brilliantly said. We are coming towards the end of the show already, and there's a lot more you and I could talk about. But from here, let's go into a very quick fire round. Are you good with that?
Sure. I don't even know what it is, but actually I do, because I listen to you. So let's have at it.
Cool. So what makes Lou cry, as in sad?
I have one of my sons lives in Colorado. I live in California. The other one lives in Chicago. And nothing is worse than getting on the plane and coming home.
Ah, I get that.
That's the one.
I understand that. My eldest daughter lives in Australia. Same thing. It's like, okay.
I call it the fiery reentry.
Yeah, that's I'm with you. What makes you cry laughing?
Oh my gosh. I'm an observer of people, and I laugh with people. I don't like laughing at people.
Sure.
But just when you see things, and it's horribly wrong, but when you watch the videos on the internet, when somebody just does something so profoundly stupid, it's not the profoundly stupid, but the look on their face, like, oh my God, what was I thinking? That impact moment in their head, like, oh my God. It's horrible, and I'm embarrassed. It's like a guilty pleasure.
Well, I was going to ask you, what's a guilty pleasure? You just gave me that one too. So that's
guilty pleasure is, there's never been an episode of Dateline that I won't watch twice.
Really?
First of all, I just find the human condition interesting.
Yeah.
And there are so many things. I can't understand a mass murderer. It's such a concept that's foreign. Or, I was talking with a friend the other day, a female, and some guy just was really god-awful horrible. Or when I was in the movie business, a great example is Harvey Weinstein, who I knew. And I knew he was a horrible person. I did not know he was an alleged rapist, and one day they're going to find out if the alleged disappears. But I can't understand that behavior. For the most part, I was raised by a single mom. So when I watch Dateline, I say, how do people do that? Yeah, but I find the way they construct the stories, and it's interesting. That show is possibly one of the best storytelling shows.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Exactly how to keep you to the very end and do the setups. There's so much. So I learned storytelling from them, but I find it fascinating story.
I have to say that as somebody who teaches story, I'll often watch shows and I watch an episode of a show that's 22 minutes or 44 minutes. And I'm like, how did they tell 3 consecutive stories interweaved with each other in that period of time? And for me, I've always said, writing is brilliant, but editing is the magnificence. Editing is the genius. And when I teach people how to be speakers, it's one of the things I say is, the hardest part of your presentation is the editing. And they go, what do you mean? Because you have to leave in the details that matter and remove the details that don't, and you don't know which is which. By virtue of it's your story, you don't know which is which. That's why you have to have objectivity. You have to have somebody who can help you with that, because it's like, this is an important detail. No, it's not. I had a wonderful teacher who helped me, and I was telling this, she's telling me the story. So tell her the story. She goes, okay, so let's start here. And you know where here was? 1/3 into the story. She goes, we don't care about that part. I said, but isn't that the setup? No, throw it away.
How many times have you asked for what time is it, and they want to build a watch for you?
Right.
I just want to know what time it is.
Fantastic.
I get it.
So as we finish, Lou, please, one of the things I really like for my guests to do is to share one piece of practical advice. Not one, but one.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
One piece of practical advice that our listeners, our viewers can go away and put into action immediately.
Gosh, I'm going to go back to where we started. The thing that's really, you talked about editing, it's knowing the difference. I'm going to do two. I apologize.
That's all right.
I'm going to be a glutton. The difference between important and interesting. And really learn that line and see it. And the best way to see it is hear it when people are doing it towards you, so then you can bring it back. When you check out, you know it's interesting, it's not important. And the other one is ecosystem. Everything connects. Look for that connectivity, because it's like in engineering, we talk about root cause. And if you were setting up dominoes and you push the first one down, they all fall. That's the ecosystem. If you push down the one in the middle, you're still leaving half standing. Understanding how they all connect, that whole series, the customer, the marketing person, the salesperson, they all are connecting. The government who says how you can or how you can't. So seeing all those connections, because inside each one of those connections is incredible value and opportunity for value creation.
Absolutely. This has been awesome. I love chatting with you.
I'm honored.
Our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, because you've got books, you've got courses, you've got a million things. You've got a fabulous website. Tell them where they can find out more about you, if you wouldn't mind.
So Lew Jaffe, LEWJAFFE.com is probably the easiest place. I have a course that's available online, the One Day MBA, all spelled out, the onedaymba.org, but you can get to that from lewjaffe.com. My book is the One Day MBA, available on Amazon because they disrupted everything. And I am sure, because you're such a good sport, there's going to be a link on your website, because we want to drive traffic to you, because that's what I'm here for.
Absolutely. We will make sure that all those links are shared on the show page, and we will make sure that we get all of that out, even in all of our, as we promote for the show. Listen, it has been a joy and a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for being with us.
And I'm going to let my Boston come out. You are wicked awesome.
Cheers, mate. I appreciate that. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any previous episodes by going to our Facebook or LinkedIn pages for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. Find out how you can hire me, Dov Barron, as your leader, as a speaker or strategist for your organization. Go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. Please be aware that the research consistently shows even the fastest growing companies face the same challenges you do. They're spending money, energy, effort, time, attracting, training, and developing talent, only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're frustrated at investing in training your talent, only to have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Until next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the difference between interesting and important. And check out lewjaffe.com. LEWJAFFE.com. I'm Dov Barron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.